Buenos días, buenas tardes, y buenas noches. Bonjour, bonsoir, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you may be. Jay Slater case. Let's get rolling. It is the 13th of May, Wednesday, 13th of May, and I hope you are sitting comfortably. This could be a long and very detailed video going through what I call Dr. David's report. It's actually the report that came from Lancashire Constabulary regarding Dr. David's Freedom of Information request, but I call it Dr. David's report. It might be a longish video because there's detail I need to go through steadily and carefully, or I might at some point just say, let's leave it and do a part two. Bear with me on this. But what I do want to emphasize is that what we have received, I think, gives us some very, very interesting insights, and it gives us some leads that we need to follow in trying to find out what is actually going on here. Before I get rolling, big shout out to Dr. David for persisting with this, because it is abundantly clear to both of us that Lancashire Constabulary do not want to be forthcoming with the important details of what DCI Higson looked into when she did that forensic analysis of Jay's phone. It is, to us, it's abundantly clear on many fronts. It's abundantly clear in the time they've taken to give the briefest kind of response. And in Dr. David's first attempt to get a freedom of information request about about DCI Higson's analysis, he was given a short, sharp answer of no. You're not getting any answers. And so it's with persistence that Dr. David's gone back and said, no, some answers need to be given here because this is not totally exempt. And I am going to walk you through this, but on our behalf, I say on our behalf because the questions that Dr. David threw at Lancashire Constabulary were really the consensus of questions we all had, we being the foul play group that suspect something other than an accident happened to Jay. Let's put it like that. So yeah, hats off to Dr. David. What he received back was 4 pages worth from Lancashire Constabulary this time, and I will be posting some of it. I will be posting some of it, and I'll be going through what I think are the highlights now. But if you want to actually read what I'm going through today, be patient. Some of it will be posted. I think you know what's going on here. What I like to do is to present the information so that you can listen to it. And then I like to wait a little bit because I've got to be honest, I do like it when the accident group immediately shout out, oh, this is all fake news. He's making it up. He's lying. He's a charlatan. Dr. David doesn't exist. This is nonsense. Yeah. And then once they've fallen into that trap of assuming this is all made up, I then produce the written evidence. And even then, we'll get the likes of Laurie saying, oh, well, he's only squared off, a chunk of this. There are some words missing. The charlatan that he is, Duncan is making this up. So whatever happens, whether I present, the whole of the report, if I produce chunks of it in written form or relaying what I'm reading here, we know the accident group will do anything but understand that this is a real report from Lancashire Constabulary. I mean, I have deliberately chosen the plain white background because if there were, for example, a Weetabix box in the background or a carton of milk, the poor accident group would be totally focused on trying to find out if that is a Spanish carton or a French box of Weetabix. You know what I mean? So no distractions here. We have the plain white background. So if you are sitting comfortably, let's get rolling. Now, first of all, I do have to do a recap because just to launch into what Lancashire Constabulary had stated here isn't doing justice to the big picture. So bear with me on this. You may think you know the backstory to Dr. David's letter writing campaign, but it is very, very important, I think, to have a refresher course. It was for me. because when I went through the latest response from Lancashire Constabulary, I had kind of lost track on what exactly Dr. David was focused on. And for those of you new to the channel or the debate, Dr. David is really our letter writer. I mean, he's a lot more than that. But in a situation where you want to strike the right balance between encouraging someone very strongly to come forward with information and a tone of, respect and I don't know, a kind of dignified presence. Dr. David gets that right. I can sum up Dr. David's qualifications for doing this in that he is the only person I've ever met who has written to Ryanair, directly to Michael O'Leary himself, asking for a refund, and Dr. David got it. I mean, that's how good his letter writing skills are. Okay, so we've summed up the person behind this. Now let me go to the situation. The situation was that after the documentary, when that "listen, I'm not going to make it" snap was announced to the surprise of the whole world, I think, you, me, Dr. David, everyone was like, hang on a second, hang on a second, hang on a second. This simply can't be. Because we've got Lancashire Constabulary's DCI Higson clearly on record at the inquest stating that there was no more phone activity, talking about Jade's phone, after 8:51 a.m. And I mean, I don't think I'm paraphrasing. I think that's pretty much word for word what DCI Higson said. And yet Debbie Duncan, you got in the red corner, DCI Higson, in the blue corner, Debbie Duncan, saying, no, that's not true. That's not true at all. This snap, somehow when the phone was accessed and Wi-Fi signal was on, this last message went through to Brad, listen, I'm not going to make it. And so we had this obvious contradiction. They both can't be right. They both can't be right. Now, if DCI Higson is wrong and Debbie Duncan is right, and Debbie Duncan's saying there was phone activity after 8:51, Jay got into the phone was on, yeah? Jay got into his Snapchat account. Jay is typing away, he's drafting his message there. And as far as I understand it, he does press send. Yeah? Otherwise, I don't see how this message is floating around there. He presses send, but the phone dies. Okay. If Debbie's right, then DCI Higson is wrong. So the question for Dr. David and the rest of us was, if DCI Higson is wrong, how can she be wrong? It's either she's incompetent and she can't figure out when the last phone activity was, in which case DCI Higson should never have been in charge of this, and Freedom of Information surely should tell us that these mistakes have been made, or DCI Higson and her team did it exactly right. They got this right, which means Debbie Duncan must be wrong. And if Debbie Duncan's wrong, does that mean Debbie Duncan is lying? This is what we had to focus on. So Dr. David's idea was to, well, obviously ask Lancashire Constabulary, but failing to provide us with the answers through a Freedom of Information request, to, I guess, force the hand of Lancashire Constabulary to ask these questions. But we do need to focus on one other element here, because I said we need to be aware that Lancashire Constabulary have been very, very unwilling to cooperate in any way whatsoever, to the point where, to me, it's obvious they were just hoping that Dr. David would disappear, There is a time limit, meaning Lancashire Constabulary just can't sit on Dr. David's letter and not answer it. I believe, and don't quote me on this, not 100% sure, I think 40 days is the limit. They have to answer within 40 days. Well, in this latest request, I believe it went way beyond 40 days, and Lancashire Constabulary told Dr. David they were extending what is already a limit to give themselves more time. And again, don't quote me on this. Maybe when I post it, you'll see it. But I think from the 40-day limit, it went up to 70 days before Dr. David actually got a response. But my point here is, I feel absolutely sure that Lancashire Constabulary wanted Dr. David to go away. They were hoping the time limit would expand. He wouldn't question it. He would just go away. But Dr. David didn't do that. Dr. David was persistent and said, you're past the limit. I'm still waiting for a response. He eventually got it. Thank you. Sometimes you have to just hang on in there, sit tight, persist, but sit tight, and you will get something. All right, let us turn our attention to the questions. What were the original questions? There were 5 of them that Dr. David sent to Lancashire Constabulary, which first time round they said they're not going to answer. And we'll get into why they said they're not going to answer it. Like I say, you might think you know all this, but it is very important to go back and look. So here we go. To whom it may concern, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to try to find the bit where Lancashire Constabulary make a weak attempt at apologising. What do they say here? Actually, let's go to the 5 questions. Oh no, sorry. Here it is. We apologise for the extended delay in this response and appreciate your patience. We are currently experiencing extremely high workloads and this impacts on our timelines. Thank you for your understanding. Well, actually, I don't have that much understanding. I would say that is all bullshit. I would say that you waited until the time limit was up, and then you hoped Dr. David would go away, and now you're just prattling on about being too busy being busy, or what have you. But let's get to the 5 questions. Dr. David originally wrote, I request number 1, forensic reports, logs, or data showing phone activity or inactivity, including records confirming the phone ceased activity at 8:51. Exactly. So number 1 is saying, give us something to look at here. Yeah, freedom of information, please. Just show us something that shows at 8:51 phone cut off, no further activity. Number 2, Dr. David is asking under the Freedom of Information Act, internal documents, messages or emails discussing the phone's activity before and or after 8:51 on the date in question. Yeah, I mean, on point 2 there, it's not just DCI Higson. There are going to be internal memos, messages, what is going on here in the discussion among the team, DCI Higson's team. Let's see that, please. Number 3, documentation on the method of how the phone or phones could be accessed. For example, PIN, biometric data, or other method. Good point. Still a mystery to me how anyone got into Jay's phone. I was under the impression that teenagers, they had their phone, they had their PIN, and that was it. I didn't think they went round telling their parents and Uncle Tom Cobley and all how to access the phone. But how did anyone get in that phone? Number 4, any records concerning the existence of a second phone in use by Jay Slater. I've stressed this is so important. If there are 2 phones in play, I would have thought both needed to be forensically examined. And number 5, this one was key to my mind. Any correspondence with the Spanish authorities concerning examination, custody, or analysis of the phones. Obviously, this is key because you would have thought that the Spanish, already having done this forensic examination of the phone, would have a report. And that report would ultimately be in the hands of DCI Higson, and she would be able to compare what the Spanish found and what DCI Higson found. And anything in the middle that doesn't correspond needs to be questioned, I would say. Because just bear in mind, the situation we have is Jay's phone is found, it passes into the hands of the Spanish authorities, it then passes into the hands of Debbie Duncan, and it then passes into the hands of Lancashire Constabulary. This section in the middle, where it's in the hands of the family, is absolutely key. I'll just say it one more time. Normally in this situation, as far as I understand it, and my limited experience of these situations, is that when you've got one police force working in league with another police force, that report from police force A goes obviously to police force B, and any discrepancy in what police force B finds with what police force A finds is a cause for concern. I really shouldn't have to go through this, but Accident Group are paying close attention. So yes, of course. Number 5, correspondence with Spanish authorities concerning examination, custody, or analysis of the phone. Very, very important. Now, When Dr. David, months and months ago, sent that off, of course, he and I and we were all hoping that we would get a whole flood of information, answers to these questions, and that, this would set us on the path to finding out the truth. DCI Hickson got it right, or Debbie Duncan got it right. Unfortunately, what came back first time round was that no answers would be given because all of this information is exempt from Freedom of Information Act. Now, I've just found the first response, initial response, and this was 4th of December 2025. So again, month after month, this is going on. 4th of December 2025, initial response. Please be advised that the information requested has been deemed exempt from disclosure by virtue of the following listed exemption. Section 32, 1C2, information contained in court reports. In other words, now I'm going to start summing bits and pieces up here because otherwise we just end up reading page after page. In other words, if information is directly concerned with a court report, Adderley wants a court report, and that information is then presented in court, Freedom of Information apparently doesn't allow questions pertaining to that court report to then be released. There are exemptions. Freedom of information doesn't mean you're free to see all information the police have been working on. Now, on the one hand, I understand some of this because if the police are working on a case, various cases, and they have sensitive information that could lead to future arrests, the public demanding to see that information ain't going to work. Now, that kind of thing I get. But in this case, what has been aired at the inquest is all over. Yeah, the verdict is in. We now just have this last hanging question of, is Debbie Duncan right or is DCI Hickson right? So in the full picture here, Dr. David and I didn't really get why answers to these questions would be exempt. Just to hide behind, oh, well, it's a court case and therefore we're not going to answer anything, didn't seem right. Not at all. And so this is where I'm going to sum up a bit. This is why Dr. David went back and said, hang on a second, you can't just use this exemption all the way through my 5 points here. Because what I'm asking is for the public to see that the workings within Lancashire Constabulary, it doesn't really matter that this information is for the court case. The public needs to see that DCI Hickson and her team have done the right thing, that you've followed the right procedures, that we have faith in the way you do this because it is apparent either DCI Hickson didn't do the right thing or Debbie Duncan is lying. So Dr. David went back to this. It is to show the mechanism in place that led DCI Hickson to make her conclusions is correct, is what we're looking at. The whole court thing and the verdict isn't really connected to that. And I think that's the point here. Unless we have faith that DCI Hickson got this right, the public really doesn't feel that the verdict and the inquest is done. Let's leave the whole rationale behind. The point is, Lancashire Constabulary came back and gave some answers. So already we see answer 1 is you're not going to get any information. Sounds a little bit like Luggy in the accident group and Debbie Duncan, doesn't it? You're not going to get any answers. You don't deserve any answers. This is all secret, so go away. But in the second response, we had, okay, what we said first time round is right. We don't have to give you any answers, but we will give you some explanation and some information to explain what's going on, basically. So let me read out what Lancashire Constabulary said, first of all, about this discrepancy between what Debbie Duncan said and DCI Hickson said. Listen carefully. This is where you need total attention. Lancashire Constabulary said, by way of explanation, the reason for the discrepancy between DCI Higson's evidence at inquest and the final message, in quotation marks, in the documentary is due to the fact that Jay's family had possession of the phone for a significant time prior to Lancashire Constabulary facilitating the forensic acquisition of the data, solely at the request of the coroner. I'm going to walk you through that again, because something's still not adding up here. I'll point that out in a second. But it does point out that the heart of the problem is you have Spanish authorities here, you have Lancashire Constabulary here, but in the middle, that phone is in the possession of someone else, that third party, the family. Let's go through it again. By way of explanation, the reason for the discrepancy between DCI Higson's evidence at inquest and the final message in the documentary is due to the fact that Jay's family had possession of the phone for a significant time prior to Lancashire Constabulary facilitating the phone. So it's almost saying, you know what? If the family hadn't had the phone, we'd never been put in this position. That's what it says to me. It's like, this discrepancy's happened because the family had the phone. And by implication, I'm almost thinking, well, the family had the phone, therefore we never had total control of what was on that phone. Yeah, DCI Higson could go through it, but there are certain things that, well, for example, this snap that was there and then went. Let me focus on this as well, just a second. Solely at the request of the coroner. Those are important words too. This forensic examination happened solely at the request of the coroner. Now that's pointing out, I think, that no one in the Duncan Slater family ever requested Jay's phone to be forensically examined in Lancashire. I find that a little bit surprising. I would have done, or I would have found an expert to analyse it. But anyway, again, Lancashire Constabulary are distancing themselves somewhat from the interactions the family might have had with the phone and themselves. Solely at the request of the coroner did DCI Higson do this. No one else asked for it. All right. Now, the big problem with this is it actually doesn't address the discrepancy. And this is where I think Lancashire Constabulary are playing a silly game, and it's a very nasty game. Because the discrepancy is not that last message. The discrepancy is quite simply that DCI Higson said there was no phone activity after 8:51, and Debbie Duncan saying there was. That's the discrepancy. Whether the family had access to anything, whether the family saw or didn't see that snap, to me, is irrelevant. That is not the discrepancy. The discrepancy isn't the family had possession of this phone and might have seen something that DCI Higson didn't see. The discrepancy is one person says that phone died and the other person says the phone didn't. So I think this is an example of Lancashire Constabulary failing to address the heart of the discrepancy. They want us to think, oh yeah, snap message, that can disappear. Family saw something that, DCI Higson couldn't see. Okay. Well, not okay. Not okay at all. Let us move on. Lancashire Constabulary then said, when the family had received the phone, following the conclusion of investigation by Spanish authorities, the family have manually accessed the Snapchat app. In doing so, they observed the message which was unsent. The messages were automatically set to disappearing. Therefore, once the device had power and Snapchat was accessed, the message sent, then vanished. It is for this reason that the message did not show on the forensic read, as it was no longer visible on the device. All of this blah, blah, blah is basically telling you that Lancashire Constabulary are saying DCI Higson could not have possibly seen that last message because it was a disappearing one. That Debbie Duncan, it doesn't actually say Debbie Duncan could have seen such a message. It says Debbie Duncan did see that message. And this is one of the problems, again, I have with Lancashire Constabulary. Just like all the media narratives we've read, they 100% state this as fact when we don't know it's a fact at all. There's not one person on this planet that knows what Debbie Duncan saw when she turned that phone on. The Lancashire police have no idea. Obviously, if it's a vanishing message and DCI Higson can't see it, no one knows whether that ever existed or not. But what bothers me by this, and I'll read it through again, is that Lancashire Constabulary, like all the mainstream media, like everyone out there apart from our little group, is just stating this as fact. Marvin of Streamline Entertainment pointed this out today, that every, for example, Manchester Evening News article you read, it states these things as facts without going to the source and showing us how it must be a fact. But this is a prime example. I want to read it again, follow it, and just listen how it's stated so factually when no one knows if it's a fact or not. Here we go. When the family had received the phone following the conclusion of investigation by Spanish authorities, the family have manually accessed the Snapchat app. In doing so, they observed the message, which was unsent. The messages were automatically set to disappearing. Therefore, once the device had power and Snapchat was accessed, the message sent then vanished. It is for this reason that the message did not show on the forensic read, as it was no longer visible on the device. Stated as a matter of fact. Okay, let us have a quick look at some of the aspects here. It says manually accessed the Snapchat app. Now, some people speculated that maybe from another device, Snapchat was accessed. You know, maybe Zach on his device managed to access Jay's account and see things that way. Doesn't say that. It says manually access, the family or Debbie manually accessed the Snapchat app. Manually access means to me they're on Jay's phone and they get into Jay's Snapchat account. How does that work? I don't know. I would have thought they would need Jay's password to get into the Snapchat app. But maybe not. Maybe that's just open and it just opens automatically. So question mark there. Is a password needed or not? I don't know. You've got to keep in mind that Snapchat servers, this information's been out there a while, Snapchat servers are designed to automatically delete unopened one-on-one snaps after 31 days. Now that's an unopened snap. In this case, we have this grey area where it's a draft. But I do question this word unsent. Again, Lancashire Constabulary, in doing so, they observed, the family observed the message which was unsent. Well, in what way is that message unsent? What's your definition of unsent? To me, once you've written your draft and you press send, that is sent. It might be received, but it's sent. And that is why Debbie said it was flying around in the air somewhere. So how do Lancashire Constabulary say that message was unsent? To me, unsent is no one pressed send. So if it's just a draft, it should have disappeared, I would have thought. For the sake of argument, let's say sent was pressed and then the phone died. Hang on a second. If sent was pressed and the Wi-Fi signal was working, Brad would have received it. So let's say sent was pressed, but because there was no Wi-Fi, it didn't actually get received, and then the phone died. I don't know. I'm just curious about this sent and unsent thing. Curious word messages there. Messages. What do they say? The messages were automatically set to disappearing. I think it means the messaging or the messages setting was set to automatic disappearing. Now, I would imagine DCI Higson could see that. So DCI Higson sees that, and she knows that any snap, would vanish, once it's sent. That still doesn't explain, if DCI Hickson can see that, it still doesn't explain how this phone magically comes back to life after DCI Hickson said it had died. If the message did not show on the device, how can it be stated that the message ever existed? Yeah, this is the bit that I have a sticking point with. You see, we keep getting told that message was listen, I'm not going to make it. But if DCI Hickson never saw that because it's a disappearing message, and DCI Hickson says all I can see is the Snapchat app was set on messages to disappear, but obviously I don't know. I don't know if there was a message out there. All I can say is there's no phone activity. So from what I see, he wasn't even in Snapchat. So if DCI Hickson never saw that message, the only person, the only people we have that say that message was, before it vanished, listen, I'm not going to make it, is Debbie Duncan. And then on Brad's side, he would have received it. And he would be able to confirm that message was, listen, I'm not going to make it. Do we think Brad took a photo of that as soon as he received it? Yeah. With these disappearing messages, those of you that use Snapchat, is it that the sender writes a draft, sends it, and then it's disappeared, it's gone, it doesn't exist anymore? And on the receiver's end, the receiver receives the message, reads it, it disappears, and it's gone forevermore. One of my points here is that this, to me, it seems like a very, very convenient world that some of these really key messages, whether it be, listen, I'm not going to make it, or, you know, I'll give you one warning, you know, you're not going to see your boy again, whatever. Is it a convenient world where these very key messages just disappear? Or is it that these messages are sent this way and received this way because the people sending and receiving don't want any record of these messages? Which one is it? Problem I have with the disappearing message is you would have thought that you would want people to know about this, especially if it's the last words before you die. Listen, I'm not going to make it. If a person chooses for those words to disappear, to me, it's an odd decision. If you're wondering which app to go into and you choose Snapchat, you know, it might have been automatic, just that was the first one that came on. But I'm just saying, to me, there's an aura of convenience that goes with these disappearing messages. I'm not saying that it means there is foul play at work here. I'm just saying these key messages that you'd love to see in real life. Yeah? Debbie says Zach took a photo of that first disappearing message. That's why we have that. That's great. If that was the genuine message. But with this last one, listen, I'm not going to make it. It's a disappearing message. So no one, apart from Debbie and Brad, can say that those words ever existed. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with it because Lancashire Constabulary, mainstream media, coroner, everyone that's been involved in pushing this narrative has assumed those words have to be true. Why is it no one questions that these disappearing messages might not be as described to us? Okay, this has gone on for over 30 minutes and I haven't got to the what I think are the real bombshells. So I'm going to leave it there. I am going to do a part two, and I will try to do that as soon as I can. But yeah, that is we're kind of halfway through some of the juicy bits, the very key bits that Lancashire Constabulary sent to Dr. David. My wrap up for this one is Dr. David will be going back for a third attempt at Lancashire Constabulary because they obviously haven't come forward with identifying the discrepancy. They've waffled on about where's the vanishing message, disappearing message. You know, DCI Hickson can't see that, can she? Family had the phone. Family had the phone. They were doing stuff. They haven't addressed the discrepancy. The discrepancy is either that phone died when DCI Hickson said it did, or it didn't. If it didn't, DCI Hickson messed up. And if it didn't, Debbie's telling the truth. But we've got to know this discrepancy is one or the other. And Lancashire Constabulary won't tackle it. The accident group can tell us. Debbie knows the truth. Debbie talks to Ivor. Ivor knows the truth. Ivor can tell us all now. But these people don't want you to know. They have to be forced, month after month, freedom of information request, pressure, and all the rest of it. They have to be forced to do it. Why is that? If it were all an accident, just tell us. The fact you don't tell us tells me it wasn't an accident. All right, part two coming up as soon as I can do that. Hasta luego, adios. See you next time.